Seventh Dragon 3 is the fourth entry in the Dragon series, and the first one that was officially released in English. Set far into the future when monsters have descended upon the earth and humanity has been brought to its knees, it's up to you and a band of heroes to travel through time and collect several items that have the power to stop the birth of a final, deadly dragon with the power to destroy the world once and for all. As for the game's main draw, combat and exploring, the first word that comes to mind is addictive. With 8 character classes to choose from and a number of different skills to learn for each, there's plenty of variety to keep you busy. From the outset, you get to create your party from scratch, and there's a nice amount of customization available to tailor them to your liking, with even more options becoming available the further you make it into the game. May that be weapons, armor, or cosmetic choices, the game is constantly drip feeding new items and ways to counteract enemies. Now, combat is at the core of the experience, with a turn-based system in place that sees you building an offense around various skills that can drastically increase your damage output. On top of this, the number of effects of buff and debuff skills among the classes opens up even more doors for several abilities and will help increase the effectiveness of others used by your party members. In short, there's a hell of a lot of strategy involved in each battle, and getting to grips with the various systems that comprise the game may seem daunting at first, but after some time you'll slowly begin to realize what works and what doesn't against certain enemy types. For 3DS players, 7th Dragon 3 is yet another excellent JRPG. Even though it doesn't have the polished ideas and well-rounded mechanics of the greatest in the genre, it still manages to have a unique personality and strong enough gameplay that makes it easy to recommend. Coming from the same developers of Luminous Arc on the DS, Stellar Glow is essentially a spiritual successor to the series, and follows the journey of a hero known as Elcrest who must leave his hometown and save the world. Right off the bat, it's incredibly cliche, and in all honesty, the story is by far the weakest part of the adventure, but what makes up for it are the characters you'll meet along the way, who add a distinct amount of personality to the world, but most of all, it's the gameplay that really hits home. It's basically an SRPG, and for those of you who are new to the genre, it sees all of the battles taking place on a grid, where you're responsible for clearing the map of enemy units. It all plays out in a turn-based manner, where the player has several options when it's their turn, from moving, carrying out attacks, selecting items, or waiting until an opportunity presents itself. It goes a lot deeper than this, however, as attacks to an enemy's side or rear provide a bonus in accuracy and damage, with the same applying to the player themselves, so careful placement of your units is essential to appear victorious. Further complicating the gameplay is the song system, which is what really sets Stellar Glow apart from many of the other RPGs on the 3DS. As you and enemy units fight it out, a gauge fills up in the upper left corner of the screen, and once full, it allows witches to use their powerful songs to turn the tide of battle. Some of them increase your defense as well as movement or the amount of healing you'll receive, with many different options becoming available the further you make it into the game. It's a really great mechanic that adds a serious amount of strategy to even the most mundane of encounters. Overall, even though the story lets it down, the charming visuals, engaging gameplay, and slamming soundtrack help us stand shoulder to shoulder with many of the other RPGs on the handheld. Return to Popalocrois is a sequel to an often overlooked series that began life on the PlayStation 1 and built upon the many systems and mechanics of the first game, resulting in one of the handheld's most charming RPGs. Based on a manga that reaches all the way back to the late 1970s, you take on the role of a prince known as Pietro, and although his homeland may be peaceful, it's not long until he's thrown into a strange new world by an evil sorceress, where Pietro must fight alongside his companions in order to find a way home. On the gameplay front, it carries over many of the RPG elements from the old games, such as the grid-based combat system and roster of characters, as well as incorporating some farming sim gameplay that helps make Story of Seasons so engaging. The battle system is similar to tactical RPGs such as Final Fantasy Tactics, but instead of moving square by square, each character has a certain range of movement represented by a blue grid. Once you're done moving, you can target any enemy that's within your attack radius by selecting from a wealth of different abilities, with more and more becoming available the further you level up, or which characters occupy your party at any given time. As I mentioned earlier, farming is also a huge part of the gameplay, and here you can grow crops as well as other items that you can sell for money. Once you get to a certain point in the game, you'll get the ability to fuse items together, and it's here where you'll be unlocking some of the more powerful options throughout the journey. It's a great system and provides a welcome break from the usual exploring and fighting, and actually rewards you in meaningful ways. Overall, the world presented in the game is lively, full of charm and satisfying gameplay. It's a well-rounded experience that manages to merge both farming and RPGs masterfully that's extremely hard to put down once you start playing. Fantasy Life is an open-world RPG with various sim-like elements and a huge focus on freedom where the game truly excels. Unlike many of its kind, you don't need to worry about which class to select for your character or where you need to invest your skill points, because you can do just about everything with any of the various types available to you, and if you change your mind, you can easily reset your stats and start again. This level of freedom is not often seen in RPGs, and because of it, Fantasy Life feels entirely unique and lets you freely take the game at your own pace without having to be bogged down with overbearing numbers or worries you'd see in similar games of its kind. Now when it comes to gameplay, it somewhat resembles the likes of Room Factory, but with a much more heavy focus on action. The combat is presented in real time in an almost Zelda-esque style that's not overly complicated or deep, but it does open up thanks to the many different weapons, skills and armor that affect your ability to tackle the ever-increasing amount of enemies that occupy the world. All of these are tied to the crafting system, where you'll be spending most of your time acquiring different items and playing several minigames that can be started by visiting a workstation. These range from carpentry, tailoring, alchemy and blacksmithing that naturally produce items that correspond with each profession. By doing so, you can achieve short boosts in healing, attack damage and defense, which play a central role in combat, and completing one of the nearly 300 quests throughout the game. For me, Fantasy Life is one of the best RPGs the system has to offer. If you like Room Factory and similar games of that kind, but always wish they were a bit heavier on the action, Fantasy Life will more than deliver. MapleStory was originally conceived as an MMO for the PC, but would later go on to receive a spin-off game on the Nintendo DS that focused on its core gameplay mechanics, with the 3DS version serving as a sequel to that game. Unfortunately, it never found its way outside of Korea, but it's now thankfully fully playable due to a full English translation, allowing people from all over the world to finally enjoy one of the most overlooked games on the handheld. It sees you taking control of a young girl who has a mysterious spirit trapped inside her, and the only way for her to be rid of it is to head out on an adventure and find out why it has chosen her. The gameplay takes the form of a side-scrolling platformer with various RPG elements that dictate your ability to tackle each and every threat inside any given level. There's about 15 in total to make your way through, each with a daunting boss waiting for you at the end, and luckily you've got an array of skills to help you along the way, from your basic attacks that can be strung together to create combos, to magic abilities and passive skills that'll help you out in a tight spot. Interlinking these levels are various towns where you're free to take on side quests that usually involve you having to find items scattered throughout each level, which you are then rewarded for with medals. Many of them require you to complete puzzles, which are never overbearing and are relatively straightforward, but it's the main quest line where you'll find yourself spending most of your time, as even though the optional content is a welcome addition, it's nothing that feels vital to complete in the game. If you're looking for a new 2D platformer with an RPG twist to jump into, then MapleStory will be right up your street. Mercenary Saga 2 is an SRPG that sees you filling the role of a knight who's responsible for getting to the bottom of an assassination attempt on the kingdom's prince. Of course, it's not long until you're drawn into a far wider conflict that encompasses the entire world, and although the story isn't exactly original, it does do a good job, but the real meat and potatoes of the game lies in combat, and it's here where Mercenary Saga 2 really comes into its own. The setup is that of your standard tactical RPG, with each encounter taking place on a grid. At the start, you've got 3 characters to contend with, but by the time the credits have rolled, you'll be dealing with up to 10 at any given time, who all have their own unique skills and roles to play on the battlefield. Naturally, you'll be leveling them up over the course of the game, and with each level you hit, you're rewarded with SP, which can be spent on advancing your character's class in a sort of branching tree, which lends a nice amount of freedom to the way in which your characters can grow. Now, one aspect of the gameplay that sticks out is the need to try and find hidden items and chests throughout each map. These often contain stronger equipment and puzzle pieces, which are essential to unlock some of the more powerful classes your characters can achieve. On top of this, there are various objectives throughout each fight that don't just default to having to wipe out the enemy, but instead impose conditions such as only having a certain amount of turns that serves to amp up the stakes of each encounter. Whilst the game doesn't have really any truly unique selling points, it still succeeds by providing tried and tested gameplay that works extremely well. So if you're fond of SRPGs, Mercenary Saga 2 is definitely worth a look. Heroes of Ruin is a dungeon crawler that, like many of its kind, allows you to create a character and choose from 4 separate classes, depending on your style of play. May that be a paladin, mage, brawler, or pistol-wielding gunslinger, each have their own characteristics that add a nice amount of variety to the gameplay. Once you've designed your character from an extensive list of options, you then set upon the world to get to the bottom of a curse that sees many of the land's warriors falling into an eternal sleep. You'll have to unlock the mysteries of the curse and find a way to break it, all the while taking on hordes of enemies while gathering as much loot as possible. The game is split up into several parts and has a main hub world where you can purchase new items and equipment from vendors, as well as accept new quests to undertake. There's a decent amount of tasks to take on, ranging from main story missions to simple fetch or kill quests, but the main focus is on loot, as during your travels you'll constantly be coming into the possession of various items that have the potential to improve your equipment or stats. Now, in terms of gameplay, combat is front and center, with each class having a range of basic attacks as well as individual abilities that can be learned and improved over the course of the game. This is largely done by a skill tree system, that upon leveling up you get to navigate and use up your skill points on one of the many different skills you can unlock. There are 30 skill points in total to be earned and 60 possible places to spend them, so with one character you cannot buy and upgrade each and every skill, making it perfect for multiple playthroughs. Whilst it's not without its fair share of issues, Heroes of Ruin is still a pretty competent RPG that's well worth checking out, especially for fans of Diablo and similar games like it. Unchained Blades is very much an old school RPG in every sense of the word. It's a first person dungeon crawler that places a huge emphasis upon grinding and exploring, but the twist is that each dungeon is in fact a titan, a huge, larger than life monster that must be traversed level by level and then ultimately taken out once you've reached the top. The first aspect of the game that will likely impress anyone that plays it is the quality of the artwork that's on display. Your party members, the few NPCs in the game, and the various towns you visit are very well drawn and presented, but it's the enemies themselves that really take it to the next level. There's no mere palette swaps, and instead you'll come across a wide range of different species that all have their own designs and, more importantly, ways of fighting that you'll have to figure out how to counteract on the fly. Your companions fill the traditional RPG roles such as tanks, healers and mages, with up to 8 different options becoming available before the game ends. And as you would expect, you get to gradually unlock stat increases, active skills and weapons by navigating a grid that's similar to the system found in Final Fantasy X. But while fighting enemies throughout the game, you can earn a monster's trust through a combination of luck and skill, and then recruit them by succeeding in a short timing-based minigame. Unchaining enemies, as it's known, allows you to attach them as helpers to each of your party members, where they can enable specific skills and may take attacks on your character's behalf. Building a solid group of followers is essential to making it through the game, and is essentially one of the most rewarding aspects of it as a whole. If you can find it for a good price, then Unchained Blades would make a welcome addition to any RPG fans collection. Code of Princess is an action hack-and-slash RPG that's set in a feudal fantasy world where the player takes on the part of a princess who's looking to clean up her land and rid it of the monsters who have begun to appear throughout it. The gameplay takes the form of a side-scrolling perspective with various planes that the player must rapidly switch between and chain together a multitude of weak and strong attacks into combos. Sure, it's nothing you probably haven't seen before, but it's the execution of the concept that elevates Code of Princess above many of the similar experiences of its kind. Needless to say, Code of Princess is not a normal RPG, and rather than taking itself seriously, the game mocks many cliches typically associated with the genre. Because of this, a sort of light-hearted atmosphere permeates throughout the entire game, which is mainly due to the incredible cast of characters you'll be meeting along the way and in certain points get to play as. Each of them bring their own mechanics to the table, from those who are strong in magic to those who focus on using weapons. There's a nice variety to the setup, allowing players who may prefer one type of play to the other to settle in on one that suits them the best. Now, the RPG elements come in the form of leveling up, where you can apply your experience points to one of many different attributes such as health, defense or strength, which all have a noticeable effect out on the field. And when you couple this with something known as burst mode that allows you to double your offensive power upon filling your magic gauge, you'll become a nigh-on unstoppable force to be reckoned with. Even though the game is quite short, Code of Princess is still well worth the price of admission, so if you can find it for a good deal, make sure you don't pass it up. Conception 2 takes place in the fictional world of Atera, which has been locked in war with the forces of evil for countless years. The negativity of mankind has caused various rifts to appear throughout the land, with monsters proliferating within them and causing havoc to the surrounding areas when they appear. Various children within the kingdom have an affinity with something known as star energy, and if they are one in the many hundreds that begin to notice a specific mark appearing on their bodies, they are whisked away to an academy where their powers are harnessed and trained to fight against the incoming threat. Now the game is split up into various dungeons you must explore, all the while taking part in battles where the goal is to defeat each enemy and create star children. You're paired with one of these children and must utilize their powers to overcome each enemy, with another group of them following you into battle that operate as a support unit. There are tons of classes in the game, so each unit can be pretty diverse and effective, and the game encourages you to experiment with different styles that offer up many ways to defeat each enemy. The more effective you are within the world, the more powerful star children you will receive. The concept is similar to other monster collecting games in that you create different characters that specialize in certain stats and use them to battle for you. It's a really engaging system that offers up nigh on endless amounts of possibilities, and this is where Conception 2 steals the show. On the whole, it won't exactly be for everyone, but if you're fond of the likes of Persona and enjoy the intricacies of creating your own team of formidable fighters, then Conception 2 will not disappoint. Well, that does it for today's video. Keep an eye out for part 2, as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos which release every Monday and Thursday. You can follow me on all of the socials which are linked below to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with and to take part in giveaways as well. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters: Rhino, Skilljim, Shuden, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Maximus, Scott, Alfred, Terry, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy, Curse Salaryman, Fake and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links down below. As always, thanks for taking the time to check the video out. I'll catch you next time.